There's going to be a lot of new fighting games coming out soon, and with it will come new players and also casual players who don't stick around in the fighting game community but tend to pick up and play new releases, especially with Mortal Kombat 11 coming out soon. I have a large portion of that player base in mind with this video, and all these tips are going to apply to the genre as a whole. So if you're the type of person that always says things like "I suck at fighting games" and you don't mean it ironically, this video is going to make you less free, and feel free to share it around with anybody else who you think might benefit from it. Reason number one is a really simple one. You don't know how to measure your success. New fighting game players are always getting frustrated because they set their expectations way too high. Don't get frustrated because you can't do a fireball or you can't do some kind of input, or salty because you can't do that combo that you've been wanting to do that looks really cool. I get it, we all understand, but understand it's a natural progression to get to that point. So you want to focus on getting better bit by bit each time you play, and don't worry specifically on wins and losses. If you're new, worry about what you did better each match and celebrate that regardless of if you win or lose. I did make a video on this about like how to treat losses and how to handle the learning process. This is number one. If you can't get this down, then you're not even going to make it far enough to the physical aspects as to why you actually suck at the game itself. But this one is number one because it's very important, because you're not even going to make it there if you don't have this down. Reason number two, you cling to false ideals and or make excuses. So let's knock down some classic excuses that only exist in the minds of new or bad players. The classic excuse is you're just spamming the same move over and over again. Everything in fighting games can be countered, first of all. So if your opponent is doing the same thing over and over, that one thing they're doing over and over again does have a counter, and they wouldn't be able to do it over and over again if you just knew how to counter it and then stopped them from doing it. The problem is you don't, and they're not obligated to let you win. They're just exploiting a flaw in your gameplay in which you need to get better. It's frustrating, it's embarrassing, and in your eyes it's not fun. That's fine. You can try to make that argument, but now that you've made that argument, what are you going to do to get better? Because you can't control how the other person plays, and it's only holding you back from actually leveling up. The interesting thing is this concept of spamming or the opponent not having honor or not letting you get up off the ground doesn't exist in literally any other game or sport. If you keep getting killed in a shooter, people are just going to tell you to get good because you keep dying over and over again. It's your fault. If you keep getting scored on in a sport like basketball or something, they're not going to stop scoring on you because they feel bad for you. They're going to continue to do so, and it's your job to stop them and get good. They're trying to beat you by any means necessary. It's the same thing where if you can't get past your opponent's fireballs because they're zoning you out because you're playing too impatient, you need to figure out and learn how to get past it. That's what training mode is for. There's plenty of online videos of people playing certain matchups. Just study it up. Take everything into extreme accountability that it's your fault, and let go of those false ideals that people need to play a certain style that, you know, maybe your friend played back in the arcade days when it was just you two. I promise you, in the competitive scene and in online, everyone is encouraged to do everything they can do to win. If a character is really frustrating to you, at the very least, blame the character, blame the game or something like that. It's not a healthy mindset, but it's much better than blaming the player because it's not their fault. We're all just trying to win. At the end of the day, complaining is okay. We all complain. But if you're going to complain, you have to follow it up with action. Like, okay, you've complained, but what are you going to do about it? What have you done? So the next time you find yourself complaining or making an objection or statement that X character is really good or broken, at least follow it up with what you've tested in training mode about it. Instead of just saying, oh, this character does way too much damage, or oh, this character's zoning is too strong. Like, you know, try saying like, you know, oh, this character's zoning is way too strong. I tried in training mode to do XYZ against it and it doesn't work. Like, make an open dialogue about it so that you learn something instead of just complaining. That way you're constantly improving. So reason number 3 that you lose at fighting games is you don't know your frame data. The first two were more of mental hurdles that prevent players from accepting their losses due to being discouraged or making excuses. This third reason, though, is a tangible reason that beginners and non-hardcore fans lose frequently. You can actually be a decent online warrior at fighting games without exactly fully understanding frame data if you just play fighting games a lot, but you're at a major disadvantage to those that actually do fully understand it. Okay, so what actually is frame data and how do you apply it? So there's plenty of precise guides on frame data all over YouTube and all over the internet, but I'll touch on it briefly, and if you have any questions, just put a comment down below for me. So fighting games typically run at 60 frames per second. Frames are just another way to measure time. Fighting game moves are broken down into 3 parts. The first is startup frames. This is how long it takes for the move to start up. The second is active frames, and this is how long the move has an active hitbox and is able to connect with an opponent. The third is recovery, and this is how long it takes for you to recover from an attack. If I say one move starts up in 3 frames and another starts up in 7 frames, and both moves are performed on each other by opposing players at the same time, the move that starts up in 3 frames will hit first, even though both players input their attacks at the same time. When you look at your frame data under the startup column, the move with the lowest number means it takes the least number of frames to start up before it becomes active, making it your fastest attack. Knowing this against an opponent who doesn't utilize their fastest attack in situations where you both hit an attack at the same time, the player who's aware of this and chooses the correct button will always connect first. The second important piece of frame data is understanding whether an attack is plus or minus. So you'll often hear commentators say this all the time. If you're watching fighting game streams or tournaments, they'll say, oh, that move is plus on block, or that move is minus on block, or plus this on hit. So basically what that means is that when you're looking at frame data, you'll see one column that says on hit, and you'll see another column that says on block. And every attack in that column will have a move that it'll have a number there that's either a plus and a number or a minus and a number. So essentially how this works is that whenever an attack connects with an opponent, it's either going to hit the opponent or the opponent is going to block it. So if it hits the opponent, what happens in that moment is the opponent is frozen in a state where they cannot move because they were hit. This is referred to as hit stun. They are stuck, they can't move. And the attacker is stuck recovering from the move that they performed. So both players essentially cannot move. Now that move, because it's on hit, you look at the on hit column and you look at the number. So whatever number that is how many frames, and it'll typically be a plus. If it's a plus, then that means that you are recovering faster than the person who got hit by it. So if it's a plus and a number, that means that you recover that amount of frames before they do, which means you have that amount of frames to act first. That means you're on advantage. That means you're plus. So typically, let's say that, for example, you have a move that's plus 2 on block, right? That means if you do the move on an opponent and they block the move, they're stuck in what's called block stun, very similar to hit stun, but they're stuck in an animation where they're blocking and they can't do anything else. The attacker is stuck attacking and recovering from that move. So understanding what moves are plus is very important, because if a move is plus 2, that means the attacker can act for 2 frames before you can. So this is very, very important, because if I do an attack against you and it's plus 2, you block it, that means I have 2 frames to do whatever I want to do while you are stuck recovering from blocking it. So if I go for my fastest attack, let's say my fastest attack starts up in 3 frames. Let's say I do a move that's plus 2 on block, so you block it, and then I have 2 frames to do whatever I want to do. So I do a move that starts up in 3 frames. If you try to do your fastest move, which typically is going to be the same speed in most fighting games, and let's say it also starts up in 3 frames, you're actually going to lose, because while they do start up in the same amount of time, because I'm plus 2, I got to act first. So I started doing my move before you did, thus you'll get hit. This is what's called a frame trap. So knowing moves that are plus are typically going to be very key moves that your opponent's going to have. And they're going to make you block a move that's plus on block, and then attempt to basically hit you with another attack afterwards, and you'll think it's your turn to fire back, and it's not. So it's really, really important to understand that. So typically when you're looking at frame data, you don't need to know the active frames of everything or the recovery frames of everything. Your 2 most important columns is really going to be the startup column to know how fast moves start up, and then the on block and on hit column, because that's going to tell you how much time you have to act after you block a certain attack and after you hit someone. So for example, this also teaches you how to punish something. So if something is minus on block, that means that the defender that means that you as the attacker are basically stuck recovering from your move for that many frames. So it's bad for the attacker. So if I do a move that's -5 on block, that means the opponent has 5 frames to do whatever they want to do after blocking my attack. If they have a move that starts up in 5 frames or less, that means they can punish it. So the on hit and on block section is basically going to give you a lot of information out the gate. So it's going to tell you, oh, that move is plus whatever on block, I can't press anything after I block that. Or, oh, that move is -6 if I block it. That means I can punish it with this move because it starts up in 6 frames. It also teaches you how combos work, because if you hit someone with an attack and that attack, let's say, is +6, that means the attacker has 6 frames to do whatever they want after they hit you with that attack. If the attacker has a move that starts up in 6 frames or less, it will combo because they hit you with an attack. They're +6, that means they can act for 6 frames while the opponent is stuck in hit stun, so they can combo off of it essentially. So it basically just gives you a guide to quickly figure things out without having to do any guesswork in training mode. You just look at the frame data and you instantly know. Reason number 4 why new players typically struggle to pick up fighting games is because they have poor execution. If you don't know what execution is, it's your ability to execute combos and special moves, and when you start, maybe you can't really throw a fireball, or maybe now you can throw fireballs but you drop your combos, and then eventually you get to a point where you hit your combos but maybe you just can't do the most optimal ones that the highest level of players are doing. It takes time to develop muscle memory, and that's really all it is, just like playing an instrument. So you really just have to accept that, and it's just through repetition. Don't be afraid to go to training mode and try and challenge yourself. You want the right amount of challenge. You want to constantly be pushing yourself to try and do something that you're very, very close to being able to do, but not quite. And what's really funny about that is oftentimes you won't really be able to do something at first, but then if you put it down and then come back to it later, it's like magic. Your hands just pick it up and can do it like it was your bread and butter since day one. But this is a really important tip. There's not really much. This is just really simple and straightforward. Just practice. Use training mode, repetition. You might be able to do something in training mode, but you can't do it in a real match. That's normal. But it's definitely something that shouldn't be ignored. So definitely make sure you're practicing all of your quarter circle motions if that's what you're doing, or practice your combos, and just keep challenging yourself and you should be golden here. And reason number 5 why I think new players struggle with fighting games a lot. You don't familiarize yourself with other characters at all. In fighting games, you're always going to have your main that you go to, that you know everything about. Obviously, more competitive players, they don't have a choice but to explore the other characters, but specifically new players feel that it's already a bit harder to learn their own character, but you don't need to master the other characters to really get an idea for them at all. Like you just, understanding what they do and just what it's like to play that character isn't that hard. Just going into training mode and checking their moves out, so that way you have an understanding of at least what they're capable of, because it's a one-on-one game. Unless you're playing like team games like Dragon Ball, but the point is you're fighting someone else controlling a character, so there's 2 sides to it. There's obviously what you can do, but also what your opponent can do as well. So make sure you're taking the time to get an understanding of what other people can do, because someone else who knows the matchup, they know what you can do and they know what they can do. They're definitely going to have a bigger advantage over you than you will by only knowing what you can do, and then you're trying to adapt on the fly to what they're doing. You don't really understand their character completely, and then all of a sudden they do a move you've never seen before, and it's like at that point, like, you're not really losing inherently because you're a worse player, but you just don't know the matchup. That happens. Sometimes people who are inherently better players or better with their character might lose because they just don't know the matchup. That's totally a thing, and I think that's something that's also overlooked as well by newer players, so definitely make sure you're doing that. Okay, so that's basically 5 reasons that I think fundamentally newer players struggle at fighting games whenever they play new releases. So hopefully you take some of this into consideration if you're going to be playing Mortal Kombat 11 and you're a bit newer to fighting games, or really anything that's going to be coming out soon. This will help you in any fighting game that you play. I'm going to be making a lot more content for all people who like fighting games, whether you're new or whether you've been into fighting games for a while. I'm going to be putting out videos every week, so make sure that you like, subscribe, comment, all that stuff. I'll definitely reply if you comment down below. But yeah, thanks so much for watching, guys, and have a good day.